we begin with this breaking news on a hostage and ceasefire proposal in Gaza, which President Trump says is his last warning to Hamas to accept. CNN's Jeremy Diamond joins me right now. This is the first proposal since negotiations broke off in July, right? So what's different about this plan?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Fred. And in addition to that, this new U.S. proposal is no longer looking at a temporary ceasefire deal or a partial release of the Israeli hostages. Instead, this new U.S. proposal aims to get all of the hostages home and ultimately end the war. This proposal, which has now been relayed to Hamas by the United States Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, calls for Hamas to release all of the remaining 48 hostages on day one of this agreement. In exchange, Israel would halt its new offensive on Gaza City and agree to a ceasefire. That ceasefire, the duration of which would last as long as there are negotiations ongoing between these two sides to ultimately end the war in Gaza. And we're told by two Israeli officials that President Trump would ensure that this ceasefire would stay alive so long as those negotiations are still ongoing. Now, we have heard from the president himself, who posted on social media that the Israelis have accepted my terms. He says it is time for Hamas to accept as well. I have warned Hamas about the consequences of not accepting. This is my last warning. There will not be another one. The Israeli Prime Minister's office, for its part, has not confirmed that Israel has accepted these latest terms, but did say that Israel is, quote, seriously considering President Trump's proposal. They also added that it appears Hamas will continue in its refusal. We have not heard from Hamas directly on this, but that is ultimately going to be the big question here, is how does Hamas respond to what is not just a new proposal, but also a new paradigm for how to advance these ceasefire and hostage release negotiations. But it is also important to note that the way that this proposal is structured, Hamas, by giving up, releasing all of the hostages on day one, would effectively be giving up almost all of its leverage up front, relying only on assurances from the United States that a ceasefire would stay alive as long as those negotiations to end the war continue. But bear in mind that those negotiations to end the war would be extraordinarily contentious, and that is because the two sides are still very far apart on what that actually looks like. Israel has insisted that Hamas not only be out of governance in Gaza, but also that Hamas ultimately entirely disarm, which has been a red line for that militant group in the Gaza Strip. So we will have to see how Hamas actually responds to this. All of this will, of course, be subject to negotiation, but a real question here of whether this new effort, a new paradigm for negotiations, could actually prompt some kind of a breakthrough here as the parties move away from these kind of temporary ceasefire, partial hostage release negotiations, and instead towards something much broader that would see the release of all of the hostages and ultimately end the war in Gaza. I will say, though, a lot more work needs to be done before any of this has even a chance of becoming a reality. Fred?
Right. And how much hope is there from what they're hearing about this proposal?
Look, this is early hours so far. There's no question that there are a lot of people here in Israel who want to see the hostages released, want to see the war end. There are a lot of people in Gaza who are currently suffering under what is an escalating Israeli bombardment campaign and the movement of Israeli troops into Gaza City. A lot of people on the ground who are directly affected by this war on both sides who want to see this conflict end. But whether or not this is actually the way to do that, the way to unlock that, still remains very, very uncertain. Fred?
All right. Jeremy Diamond, thanks so much.